Agnes Moorehead died in 1974, and when her will was read, everyone expected the beloved TV star to leave something for her foster son. Instead, she wrote one chilling line that erased him completely from her life. She claimed she had no children, living or deceased. The boy she'd raised simply didn't exist on paper. But that was just one secret this Hollywood icon took to her grave. For years, America knew Agnes Moorehead as Endora, the scene-stealing witch from Bewitched. She was the perfect TV mother figure, sophisticated and funny, with a pristine reputation carefully crafted by Hollywood studios. They sold her as the ideal woman, talented, refined, and family-oriented. Magazine spreads showed her at her family farm, living the wholesome American dream. But behind the cameras, Agnes was living a completely different life, when the studios worked overtime to hide. Her carefully managed image was cracking, and the people closest to her knew the truth was far more complicated than anyone imagined. Her first marriage should have been a fairy tale, but it turned into a nightmare of resentment. Agnes married fellow actor John Griffith Lee in 1930, and for 20 years they maintained the appearance of a happy couple. But John couldn't handle his wife's success. While Agnes's career soared, his barely got off the ground. The tension became unbearable. He eventually said something that cut deeper than any script. He called her his meal ticket. Imagine dedicating 2 decades to someone only to discover they see you as nothing more than a paycheck. But Agnes didn't walk away. She stayed in that marriage, working constantly, her career becoming both her escape and her prison. And the problems in her personal life were only beginning. Before the marriage completely fell apart, there was something else eating away at Agnes. Her upbringing had been strict, oppressively religious. Her father was a Presbyterian clergyman who ruled with an iron fist. When she misbehaved as a child, he'd send her on stacks of encyclopedias and force her to memorize psalms. She'd stay there for hours, the words burning into her memory, her legs going numb. That kind of childhood leaves marks that never fade. Agnes carried her father's discipline and her mother's encouragement in equal measure, creating this internal war between rebellion and conformity. She wanted to break free, to live authentically, but those early years had programmed her to hide, to perform, to always maintain the proper image. And that's exactly what she did for decades, even as it slowly destroyed her from the inside out. In 1951, Agnes and John made a decision that would haunt her legacy forever. They fostered a young boy named Sean. On the surface, it seemed like a generous act from a woman who had everything except children of her own. But something was deeply wrong in that household. Friends later said Agnes could be suffocating, controlling every aspect of Sean's life with rules that felt more like chains than guidance. Lucille Ball, who knew Agnes well, said she tried to be a good mother, but was too stifling. Think about that for a second. Even her friends admitted she was overbearing. The moment Sean finished high school, he did something that speaks volumes. He left and never looked back. Not a phone call, not a letter, not even when she was dying. What could drive a child to completely abandon the woman who raised him? The answer died with both of them, but the silence between them says everything. Then there were the whispers that followed Agnes throughout her entire career. Rumors about her sexuality weren't just gossip. They came from people who claimed to know her intimately. Paul Lynde, her co-star on Bewitched, made explosive allegations. He said Agnes had relationships with women early in her career before becoming more guarded about her private life. But the real bombshell was his claim about Debbie Reynolds. According to Paul, Agnes and Debbie were romantically involved. Debbie denied it publicly, but here's where it gets interesting. When Debbie's ex-husband threatened to write about their friendship in his autobiography, Debbie came at him with legal threats. If there was nothing to hide, why the aggressive response? And when a journalist directly asked Agnes about her sexuality in 1973, she didn't deny anything. She gave a coy, evasive answer that only fueled more speculation. She essentially said she loved to be grouped with other actors in non-heterosexual relationships, but wouldn't confirm if she belonged there. That's not a denial. That's a carefully worded dodge. Her second marriage made even less sense to Hollywood insiders. In 1954, just 2 years after divorcing John, Agnes married Robert Gist. He was 17 years younger, and rumors about his cheating were everywhere. The marriage lasted exactly 4 years before imploding. After that, Agnes never had another serious relationship, at least not one she acknowledged publicly. But according to Paul Lynde, there was an explosive fight during one of her marriages where Agnes, after catching her husband cheating, screamed that if he could be with other women, so could she. Whether Paul was spreading gossip or revealing truth, we'll never know. But Agnes's evasiveness about her private life only made people more curious about what she was hiding. The pattern was clear. She'd marry men who either resented her or betrayed her, relationships that were destined for fail, almost as if she was going through the motions of what society expected, rather than what she actually wanted. The contrast between her public and private personas became even starker when you consider her work ethic. Agnes was relentless, almost obsessively so. She'd appear in multiple radio programs in a single day. She taught drama classes out of her home for years, mentoring young actors even when she was exhausted from her own projects. Friends said she couldn't sit still, couldn't stop working. Maybe that's because work was the only place where she had complete control, where she could disappear into someone else's life instead of confronting her own. Or maybe she was running from something. The expectations, the secrets, the person she could never quite allow herself to be. Despite her massive success, Agnes hated the one role that made her a household name. She thought Bewitched was beneath her. She called the scripts hack work and resented being reduced to the witch after decades of serious acting. She'd worked with Orson Welles and Citizen Kane and the Magnificent Ambersons. She'd earned Oscar nominations and critical acclaim. And now people only recognize her as Endora. The irony must have killed her. She won 6 Emmys for a role she despised. She stayed with the show for 8 years, trapped by a contract and a paycheck. Watching her serious acting credibility disappeared with every episode. Elizabeth Montgomery, who played her daughter, said Agnes was wonderful to work with. But Dick York, who played her son-in-law, called her a tough old bird. The tension on set was obvious to everyone, but Agnes kept showing up, hating every minute, knowing this role would define her forever. But Bewitched wasn't the only production that haunted her. In 1954, Agnes worked on a film called The Conqueror. It was filmed in Utah, surrounded by government nuclear testing sites. Nobody told the cast and crew about the danger. Nobody warned them about the radiation. Out of 220 people who worked on that film, nearly half developed cancer. Agnes's mother believed that movie destroyed her daughter, and she might have been right. 20 years after filming wrapped, Agnes was diagnosed with uterine cancer that had spread to her lungs. She fought it privately at the Mayo Clinic, telling her friend Debbie Reynolds that she'd survive, that she'd left it in God's hands. But there was no surviving this. The radiation had done its damage decades earlier, and now it was collecting its debt. Agnes Moorehead died on April 30th, 1974, at 73 years old. And that's when the final, most disturbing secret emerged. Her will divided her estate among colleges, universities, and friends. She left jewelry to her mother, who tragically outlived her. She donated manuscripts in her Bible collection to religious institutions. But Sean's name appeared nowhere in that document. She didn't leave him $1. She didn't leave him a letter. She erased him so completely that she wrote she had no children, living or deceased. When Debbie Reynolds offered to find Sean during Agnes's final days, Agnes refused. She said anything to do with him would only upset her. So he wasn't there when she died. He wasn't at her funeral, and he wasn't mentioned in her obituary. Whatever happened between them, Agnes's final act was to pretend he never existed. That level of rejection doesn't happen without serious pain, on both sides. So what's the real story of Agnes Moorehead? She was a brilliant actress trapped in a role she hated, a woman whose private life contradicted everything Hollywood wanted America to believe, and a mother who disowned the only child she ever raised. She survived poverty, bad marriages, industry sexism, and nuclear radiation, but she couldn't survive her own secrets. The woman who played a witch on TV
spent her real life hiding in shadows, controlling her image so tightly that even death couldn't fully expose her truth. Maybe Sean knew something nobody else did. Maybe he saw behind the performances and couldn't live with what he found there. Or maybe she saw something in him that reminded her too much of herself, the part she'd spent her whole life trying to bury. Either way, their story ended in silence. And silence sometimes screams louder than any confession ever could. The legacy she left behind isn't just her Emmy Awards or her memorable performances. It's the question of who she really was when no one was watching, and whether anyone will ever truly know the answer.